Shalom Alechem, Erev Tov, good evening. We are back together for our next Mishpat Tzedek Shi'ur after a very, very long, unintentional break. And I said that already last time, because the last Shi'ur that we had, I told you, it's been a few months since we learned together, though we had a Shabbaton in the middle, we had in-person class, but it's not the same as when we have regular classes on Mondays, and I ask for your forgiveness. It's been a difficult period for me personally, but B'ezrat Hashem, Limud Torah is able to heal all things. I was thinking about if anybody would even have time to prepare for today's class or show up to today's class, because I gave no previous warning for it. I didn't tell you there was going to be a shiur today till this morning. And I thought to myself when I was by the bedside of Mori Harav, Harini Kapat Mishkavo, his granddaughter was telling the lady in the hospital bed next to us how her grandfather, Harav Peretz, never missed a shiur. Never. I'm witness to that, but I never realized how intense it was for the family. See, Harav Peretz would come to the shiur. It was a 3 o'clock in the afternoon shiur, and it didn't matter if people were there and nobody was there. He would get in front of the microphone and teach. The room could be empty. But she said that when it came to planning family events, for example, weddings, chupot, everyone knew if it was a certain night of the week, and that was the night he gave a shiur in Neve Yaakov, that meant that either you had to make the wedding before the class or after the class, but he was never going to cancel a class to be at your wedding. Doesn't matter if you were his child or his grandchild, shiurim were important. I'm definitely not at that level of dedication and commitment yet, but my hope was tonight to do tonight's shiur, Lilu Nishmat Mori Harav Yaakov ben Rabbi Yosef Peretz Harini Kapat Mishkavo. Let's continue where we left off. So, for those of you who have access to the Google Classroom, which you should have if you're here, or you got an email in your inbox, so there should be an attachment called Bayot Yesod, Church and State in the Writings of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy. If you click on that PDF, you will see on page 52 where we left off. So it's 52 in the numbers of the actual book. I don't know what it comes out to in terms of the PDF. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy was explaining to us until today all of the duality that exists in a court system which follows halakha, meaning we have a state of Israel, a national state, which has in it a Sanhedrin, or Batei Din, which follow halakha, and then you have Batei Mishpat, courts of a melech, of a king, or enter here any civil government the Jewish people have over themselves, which maintains a secondary court system, which does not have the same rules as that of a Torah court. And part of this idea is that the Torah gives very vague, very general ideas of how to run a country. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu left it up to the lawmakers of every generation, primarily the Malchut, to be able to determine its own court system, which would function in a way that would fix society. So the classic example that we gave was the way to put someone to death for killing someone else in halakha is very complicated. You need witnesses, you need hatra'ah, you need warning. The witnesses have to be of a certain gender and a certain age and have to see something in a certain way. And if not that, then a murderer walks free. And therefore the king maintains a separate court system which allows for the malchut, the kingdom, to continue a proper court system. Now that I've summarized all that, let's continue at the bottom of page 52. We went through a number of different areas of the Mishneh Torah in the last few shiurim that we had together. And I'm hoping to finish this entire essay before the Chagim begin and finish. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy says the following in the second to last paragraph on page 52. Me'ata, from now, ברור, it is obvious or clear שחקיקה להסדרת והתקנת חיי חברה בכל שטחי החיים החברתיים מדיניים ללא כל שיעור אינה זכותה של המלכות בלבד, אלא חובתה. You see now that making this alternate court system, which better protects or polices society, is not just the option that a king can exercise when he needs to, but rather it's its obligation. שהתורה הטילה עליה על יורשיה, that the Torah places on either the king or all those who inherit the Jewish government. כל מנהיגות מוסמכת בישראל. Any authoritative government of the Jewish people. This reminds me of a story with Mori Harav. In Yerushalayim, we were having a shiur. There used to be different periods of time, different yeshivot in and out of the old city that would stop in for random shiurim. There was one individual, let's just say he was not from our yeshiva. I'm going to leave it like that. You can imagine which Jewish group he came from. And in this particular shiur that Rabbi was teaching about Dinah de Malchut Adina, the laws of the land are binding on people. This individual made a statement that the law of the land is only binding on Jewish people if the government is not Jewish. But if the government is Jewish and they are koifrim, they are heretics, his word, then there is no need to listen to the Jewish government at all. In fact, the Jewish government has no authority over the Jewish people at all. And our parents asked him, so let me ask you, Yimach Shamam, the Germans in World War II, did they have Dinah de Malchut Adina? And this man said, absolutely, but the Zionists in Eretz Yisrael don't. I've never seen Mori Harav get upset like that. He got up and he asked this man to be escorted out of the yeshiva. He can't teach Torah in the presence of a person like that. How do you have a reality where some Jews could imagine that Goyim have a law of Dinah de Malchut Adina, but the Jewish people don't? Any authoritative government of the Jewish people has in it the capability to create law. Now, we're going to talk about the limitations, laws that don't contradict the Torah, of course, like Dinah de Malchut Adina in general. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Agav Yitzuyan, Kehara historit. Says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, I only wish to make a historical note. And this is very interesting. And for those of you who are historians among us, I would appreciate your research in this at a later time. Kifi hanireh, based on what is clear to us, or seems to us, לא ניצלה המלכות בישראל סמכויותיה אלה, ועל כל פנים לא נשארו בידינו שום סימני חקיקה מאותן תקופות. We don't see that the Jewish governments in history actually utilized this right that they had to make a new legal system, or at the very least, we don't have signs or any literature that is left over from those periods. אך לעומתה, on the other hand, חרוצים ביותר היו חכמי ישראל שהם ניצלו את הסמכות שהוענקה להם אחרי ביטול המלכות. You do see, on the flip side, that the sages of Israel, after the collapse of the royal family or the government of Israel, really took it on their shoulders to make a legal system. וזיכו אותנו, and they gave us the merit of having פרשנות רחבה ועמוקה, an incredibly deep and broad commentary. שמטרתה הייתה הסדרת חיי חברת תקינים ומושלמים על פי התורה. Which the whole purpose of rabbinic literature post the collapse of the government of Israel was to create a functional and stable society for the Jewish people based on the Torah. ולא השאירו שום שטח בחיים שלא הסדירו כחוק. And there is literally not an area of life that Chachmei Israel did not get involved in and create law. הלא הם אבן העזר וחושן המשפט. The whole area, the second two parts of the Shulchan Aruch. So if Shulchan Aruch is broken down to Orach Chaim, day-to-day law, laws of prayer, laws of holidays, laws of Shabbatot, laws of all of that. Yoreh De'ah, the laws of Kashrut and Tarat HaMishpacha, the laws of Tzedakah and conversion and Sifrei Torah and Tefillin and so on and so forth. I mean, Tefillin, but Stam and the like. You then have Even Ha'ezer, which is all about the laws of marriage, divorce, and the like, family law. And then you have Choshen Mishpat, which is all about civil law, business law, financial law. V'chol safrut hashut l'sugeha v'doroteha. All of the shut is acronym for Shelot U'Tshuvot. The responsa, rabbinic responsa. People would write Chachamim questions and they would respond. She'en hi ela hasdarat chayei chevrat tkinim al pi halacha. The whole purpose of all of that rabbinic literature, it doesn't matter where it came from, was intended to continue this idea that we must constantly reevaluate and reconfigure the laws that we have in order to maintain a functional and stable society for the Jewish people. I have to say that Shelot Utshuvot in general, responses of Chachamim, it's a very unique area of literature. My feeling is that most people don't spend much time studying that. I have to say that in all the areas of Torah that I dabble, Shelot Utshuvot are my favorite. Rabbinic response is my favorite. Aside from fascinating things that you learn about the periods and the time and the rabbis that lived and the questions that were asked. I once met a professor in Yerushalayim. Her whole area of research was food of Jewish communities as she discovered them in the writings of responses. So somebody would ask a Chacham in Jerusalem, in Turkey, in Poland, in Russia, didn't matter where, a question about what happened on Shabbat if they heated up a certain food, or if non-kosher food fell into this kasher food, and so on and so forth. And she mapped out different food cultures that existed in different Jewish communities just from the rabbinic response. Aside from the historic factor there. I think that for many people, when they study halakha, it's really boring. Halakha can be very, very, very dry. I mean no disrespect to Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried, alav shalom. But somebody once asked me a question, and I said, if you wish to turn Jews off of learning halakha, teach them the Kisur Shulchan. If you wish to make sure that nobody ever wants to study halakha ever again in their life, teach them that book. Not because it's not a good book, but because the whole style of the book is do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, a lot of minhagim, a lot of chumot, and there ends the story. When you read a question that was asked a chacham, and a teshuvah, a response that was given by that chacham to a certain individual, to a certain community, you see the way that Torah thinks. You see how we go back in history and we pick apart a halakha, whether it's a pasuk from the Mikra, it's a teaching in the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Rishonim, the Geonim, the Charonim, how different communities analyze those teachings. And then you come out to a final product. By the way, you don't have to accept that final product. But the fact that you can see the journey of halakha is incredible. And for young people, especially in schools, I sometimes wonder if it would be wiser, instead of teaching them all the details. I mean, how many times can you learn Hilchot Chanukah? To do this and don't do that, and light from the right, the left, and this, the shamash here, no shamash there. How many times can you regurgitate the same thing? Instead, choose a fascinating teshuvah in rabbinic literature on that topic and spend a month on it. Spend a week on it. There were some yeshivot where the chacham would test the students like this. They would ask a question that was found in a book of responsa. I'm not have to tell you a name. Imagine this sheila teshuvah. They would ask the question, and they would give the students all of the sources that the Chacham had used. And then they would send them off to the Ben Midrash, come back to me in an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, and tell me what you did with those sources and which conclusions you reached. And the ones that reached the same conclusion, that's another Chacham who knew how to use those sources properly, then they were recognized as those who were thinking properly in the ways of our Chachamim. So, a tangent that didn't need to be taken, but I took it anyways. When I was in yeshiva in Baltimore, I found Limud Torah to be one of the most boring things I ever experienced in my life. I don't have words for that, aside from I was bored, mamash bored. We would sit on a page of Talmud. How long could you sit on a page of Talmud? I don't know, maybe some of you went to yeshiva like that also. It could be, without exaggeration, that we finished 6 or 7 or 8 pages of Talmud the whole year. And we would sit on those pages, and Rishonim, and Acharonim, and Kushyot, and this, and that, and Terutzim, and Stirot, and the Rambam, and all kinds of Pilpulim. And I just found myself like, come on, can we go to the next page already? Can we read what's actually on the page instead of everything that's not on the page? And it was a type of Torah that wasn't for me. I'm not embarrassed to tell you that. And at night, after the yeshiva finished, and Arvit finished, and the night seder finished, and all of that, I would sit in the back of the Ben Midrash. There was a little Sephardic section of books. I don't know how it got there, but the writings of Chamud Yosef. There was in the library writings of Rav Herzog, Shelot Shuvot of Rav Herzog, Igrot Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you had Abi Omer, some regular run-of-the-mill standard Shelot Shuvot. And I found myself hours, until curfew. I was there learning those books. Teshuvah after teshuvah after teshuvah, like it was water for my soul. And one day I was summoned into the principal's office. I was worried this time. I'm the kind of kid who didn't usually get in trouble. And they called me into the office, and I came. And they told me, "We're worried about you." So why are you worried about me? I'm quoting. "You're learning too much halacha." I'm studying too much halacha. That was a crime. So I had to come to some kind of agreement with them that I would ration out the amount of time that I study halacha versus the amount of time that I wouldn't. And I can tell you that I'm only a lover of halacha because of those hours that I spent back there falling in love with the way that Chachamim looked at halacha. Now you can see 3 or 4 Chachamim, how they all thought differently about the same questions. It would be wise to teach our next generation to think the same way. On page 53, Rabbi Chaim David Halevy says the following. אך שתי מגבלות עומדות בפני כל סמכות חילונית ממלכתית, הבאה לחוקק חוקים ולהתקין תקנות על פי ההלכה. And the truth is that I was thinking not to do this section at all because it's quite technical, but I figured you can handle something technical and we're not going to get stuck on it. There are 2 main roadblocks, 2 obstacles to this dual system of a halachic court system and a civil court system. The first, Katav Maharik. Do you know who the Maharik is? Anyone? Rabbi Yosef Kolon. Anyone heard of him? What do you know about Rabbi Yosef Kolon? Zev, I was hoping you would know. He's from your neck of the woods. He was a chacham from Italy. He was the rabbi of a few interesting chachamim. 2 of them I'm going to tell you. One of them, Rabbeinu Ovadia Mibartenura. Have you heard of him? Who is he? I see the room went quiet today. What happened? On the Mishnah. Very good. Very Perush on the Mishnah. And then you also have a certain Chacham del Medigo. Have you heard of him? I just spoke about him in my shiur on the books that I brought from Israel. What do you know about him? Very good. He wrote a famous book, Kehillat Dat, against Kabbalah. Very famous work. I just bought a new critical edition that was put out recently. This is the Maharik. Now, here's the problem with the Maharik. You often hear things from the Maharik that he never said. And vice versa, you hear things about Maran that Maran Rabbi Yosef Karo never said, and the reason for that is sloppy copying work. Because Maharik is the same acronym as Rabbi Yosef Karo. And oftentimes there were authors that saw Maharik and they assumed it was Maran the Shulchan Aruch, or vice versa. They saw Maran Shulchan Aruch, they thought it was Rabbi Yosef Kolon, and they swapped the teachings with each other. Here is actually from the Maharik. Maharik wrote a book which was broken down into Shorashim. Shorashim, like we have Simanim and Shulchan Aruch, so he had Shorashim, branches, roots. And Maran quotes this Maharik. Maharik says that everything that you know about the civil legal system, דהיינו דווקא לעניין ארנוניות ומנהגות של משפטי המלכות, אבל שבן אדם לחברו פשיטא דלא, שאם כן, ביטלת כל דיני התורה חס ושלום. He said this is only limited to matters of real estate law, matters of civil law that have to do with the government, but it can't be that there's a civil legal system that runs parallel to the whole Torah, because if not, you'll end up displacing the entire Torah. The second obstacle to this understanding is what the Rambam writes in the Laws of Kings, which we reviewed together. כתב הרמב"ם, the Rambam says, ואין צריך לומר, אם גזר המלך לבטל מצווה, אין שומעים לו. You don't have to say, it's so obvious, that if a king of the Jewish people, any king really, decides to uproot a law of the Torah, we don't listen to the king. I'm going to give you an example. Those of you in New York, I'm teaching here in New York, I have to be scared what I'm going to tell you as an example. But I'm makpid about it. I know that nobody else is. So I'm going to talk about Yerushalayim. That way you don't have to feel that I'm talking about New York, okay? You come to a red light in Yerushalayim. Not in a car. It's a crosswalk. Even better. I'm going to make it better. You're in a neighborhood that is a religious neighborhood, and there are no cars driving. And you see the crosswalk is red. And there are no cars. Not right, not left. What do? I'm going to judge everyone here favorably. That like me, they wait on the curb until the light turns green. I'm certain that's how people do it in Manhattan also. I'm certain that's how people do it in Yerushalayim. Mori Harav was very adamant that a red light is a red light, aside from the danger that's involved. Dina de Malchut Adina applies to any law that doesn't contradict the Torah law. There is no Torah law that says that on Shabbat you can't wait on the red light until it turns green. And so in that area, you wait. What can you do? You wait. וכבר נתבאר, and already it was explained, שכל סמכות חילונית יונקת מסמכויות המלכות. And it's obvious that all civil law, whichever government will be, gets its authority from the fact that there is a king in Israel, or a kingdom in Israel. And therefore, if the king cannot violate halakha, so too any other civil court system that we have is unable to violate halakha as well. So these are two seeming roadblocks, meaning one of them limits the area in which civil law can exist, only in areas of real estate or other such matters. And the second, the Rambam, is really anything that will contradict the Torah in any area of law is going to be a problem and therefore cannot exist in the Jewish legal system. And we come to the first one first. Why does he answer the first question first? What's the value in answering the first question first? Where do you see in the Mikra that there was value in answering the first question first and the second question second? I know it's been a while since we learned together. So I'm going to explain to you how it works. On your computer, there's a button that says mute and unmute. There's also a space bar. Some of you have that mutes and unmutes. When I ask a question, you're allowed to use that bar, please. It's a shiur, not a drasha here.
Somewhere in the Mikra, I do remember the Chazal talking about, like, there's a statement that, a wise person answers the first question first and the second question second.
Very good.
What course is teaching?
You're right. Rabbi Benjamin, you're right. It's about a story in the Mikra. Do you remember which one?
It's about Rivka and Eliezer.
Very good. Guys, my father came in for the middle answer. Rivka and Eliezer. Eliezer, Eved Avraham, he comes to find a wife for his master's son. And she answers his first question first and the second question second. And he sees from here profound wisdom, derech eretz even, that a person knows how to be organized in the way they talk about things. Sometimes you talk to people all over the place. They don't know how to answer the first thing first, second, third. You have to know how to think like a normal person. So here, he's going to answer the first one first. דברי מהריק, אף כי נראים במבט ראשון כמגבילים ביותר את הסמכות החילונית. If you read the words of the Maharik on face value, it seems that it severely limits the secular civil court system in the Jewish people. אין הדבר כן, this is not true. שהרי אם פותרים אנו את משפט המלכות מכל ההגבלות הקשורות בפיסולי עדות, because we already see that we exempt the government, the king, from all the limitations that surround pisule edut. All the witnesses that the Torah considers to be kasher witnesses, the court can take any witnesses they want. B'nei harayot, and regarding the proofs, b'arshat adam b'odat atzmo, with the person being able to testify against themselves. Pratim hamagbilim batei din shel Torah. They're the same laws that limit the batei din of the Torah. האם לא נשתנו בזה על כל פנים תוצאות הדיונים בדינים שבין אדם לחברו בדיני המלכות? But you find that by waiving them for the king, we essentially have allowed the king to violate the Torah in some way. ואם יטען הטוען שמשפט המלכות לא יתערב אלא בשיפוט פלילי בלבד, and if the one who's attacking us wants to say, well, the king only got himself involved in real criminal law, הדרוש להבטחת והסדרת חיי חברה, it was a matter that was essential. It was essential to override the Torah for the sake of society and safety and civil order. הרי הוכחנו, we already proved, שהמלך היה רשאי להשלים את הסידור המדיני כלשונו של הר"ן, ורוצה לומר חברתי. We know from the words of Daran, Rabbeinu Nisim, which we discussed last time, that the king had within it the authority to fix the Sidur HaMedini, the civil order of society. ואם רואה המלכות דרך משל, and if the kingdom sees, let's say, for example, שדיני הודאות והלוואות גורמים פרצה בחיים התקינים של המסחר, that the laws of admissions and the laws of lending and borrowing are causing for major problems in the world of business. מדוע אינה רשאית להוסיף תקנות להשלמת חיי המסחר כתיקונם? Why would the government not have the right to enact laws that would fix whatever problems exist in the business world? הלא גם רבותינו עשו כזאת בתוקף סמכותם. Even our Chachamim did this within their authority. וקבעו שבועה לכופר הכל. And they demanded a vow for the one who's kofer hakol, who denies everything. Anyone familiar with this sugya in the Talmud? The kofer hakol? Someone want to help me out? Okay, according to the Torah, I'll help you out. Say. I didn't hear you. Okay.
The Minotaur is modern mitzvahs to make a shivua or eat the time, but this is when shivut hesses.
Oh, very good. So only let's say there are two parties that are in some kind of disagreement. One of them accuses the other, unless he is modeh b'miktzat, unless he admits to some kind of guilt, or I don't know if it's guilt is the right word, some kind of participation in this matter, then we're able, according to the Torah, to drag him to court and make him make a shivua. Make him take a, I never remember if a shivua is an oath or a vow. My English is not there. The shivua. Nonetheless, if a person is kofer bakol, I have nothing to do with this. Why are you suing me? I'm not even part of the story. Technically, according to the Torah, we're not able to drag that person to the Bedin and make them take a shivua. But Chachamim instituted, no, even a person who's kofer bakol, for the sake of all kinds of areas in civil law, it's important that we are able to drag him to court and make him take a shivua, even though the Torah does not warrant it. Af sheTorah patra oto, even though Torah exempted him. Thank you very much, Rabbi Schofield. V'lo safek, התכוונו לתיקון פרצה בחיים המסחריים. They were trying to fix a problem in the area of business law. ומדוע לא הייתה המלכות רשאית על כך? If the rabbis could do it, who were bound by the Torah, why would the government not be able to do it? ובאמת, truthfully, שיש ללמוד כן מדברי הרשב"א שכתב בתשובה. You can learn this from the words of the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, who writes in a letter. This teshuvah is brought in the Bet Yosef. Maran brings it down in the laws of Choshen Mishpat. He says the following: לפי שלא נאמרו דברים אלה, אלא בדיני סנהדרין מגזרת הכתוב. These things were only said regarding the Sanhedrin. אבל בדיני דמלכותא, but regarding the laws of the kingdom, אין משגיחין בכל אלו. We don't take care of all these little details that the Torah requires from the Sanhedrin. שאין דינם, אלא אחר ידיעת האמת, because the whole area of civil law exists to prosecute a criminal after we know the truth. ונענש בדיני המלכות אפילו על פי קרובים ואפילו על פי עצמו. ושלא בהתראה. We can punish a person in a civil court system even if the witnesses are his relatives, which according to the Torah will not be allowed. Even if the witness is himself. According to the Torah, a person cannot testify against himself. And even without warning, according to the Torah, we have to give any criminal warning before we charge him with a crime. שאין דין המלכות אלא אחר ידיעת האמת. Because the whole law of the king is after verifying the truth. שאם אין אתה אומר כן, because if you don't say this, אלא שאתה מעמיד הכל על דין תורה כדין הסנהדרין, if you make all of the law follow the laws of the Sanhedrin, היה העולם שמם. The world would be desolate. שירבו דוברי שקר וחבריהם, that all the liars and their friends would increase. אלא ודאי כדאמרינן, rather it's like we said, שכל שהוא ממונה על כך מן המלך, דן ועושה כאילו במשפטי המלוכה. That anyone, any court, any individual that was appointed by the kingdom with the power of the king, they're deputized by the king, judges with the authority of the king, meaning you don't need one king to judge everybody. The king can deputize other people, authorize other people to do the job for him. Ki melech b'mishpatim elu yamid aretz. It's a play on a pasuk in Mishlei, that on this kind of law of the king, the world will survive. Here essentially says the Rashba, there's a major flaw. If all of the government's laws follow the laws of the Torah, you're going to have a situation where the world falls apart. Because nobody's ever going to be guilty, and no one's ever going to have enough witnesses, and there's never going to be enough evidence, and the amount of criminals that are going to walk away from any kind of consequence will be so numerous that it would destroy society. ויפים נימוקים אלו גם לעניינים שבין אדם לחברו. And these words are also beautiful, and they fit in matters of interpersonal halakha. ובאמת, truthfully, שזאת דעת החולקים, that this is the opinion of those who disagree. וביניהם הרמב"ן, הרשב"א והר"ן, וכנראה שכן היא גם דעת הרמה. Look on page 54. All of these chachamim, and seemingly that of the Rama, also, so we mentioned a few Rishonim, Ramban, Rashba, Ran, and also the Rama, Rabbi Moshe Yisraelish. ודעתם לומר, and their opinion was to say, שגם בדיני ממונות מנהג שציבור נוהגים לפיו כדין הוא. That even in matters of finance, a minhag that the community, the public follows, is like a law. ושיכול המלך לחוקק חוקים ולהתקין תקנות שמגמתם למנוע ריב ומדנים, וגם בדינים שבין אדם לחברו דין דין. Before you jump on me about minhagim, give me a minute. We're going to talk about this Rama at the end of the page. So don't jump on this. But you find that the Rama says that a community that has a way in which it deals with finances, that actually has some kind of authority over the community. And essentially the king would have, if not more, then at least as much power as a community has when deciding business norms among themselves. אלא שאין בכוח זה. So rather, what is the other side of this? That this doesn't have the power להתיר לישראל לדון בדיני הגויים ממש. It does not allow the Jewish people to just use non-Jewish law literally. מכוח תקנת המלכות. Because the kingdom decided that we should follow British law, now we're all going to follow British law. That doesn't work. שהרי הרמה סיים בסוף סימן שין סמכתת. The Rama himself finishes his halakha in the שין סמכתת. שאף שרשאית המלכות להתקין תקנות להנאתה או לתקנת בני המדינה, אבל לא שידונו בדיני גויים. That even though the government is allowed to make laws that are its own laws, but it's not the same as saying the Jewish people get rid of their Torah and we replace it with another nation's code. Shimken bitlu kol dinei Israel. That in that case, all of the laws of the Torah, God forbid, will be gone. Vehi dat maharik, and that's what the maharik means. Vasma, שם ביאר מדברי הרשב"א עיקרון יסודי בעניין זה, שכל הרשות שניתנה למלכות היא מדיני מלוכה, אבל דיני ערכאות אין אלו ממשפט המלוכה, אלא הערכאות דנים בעצמם, כמו שמצאו בספרי דיניהם, והוא אסור. שאם אין אתה אומר כן, ביטול חס ושלום דיני ישראל. The fact that a Jewish court is allowed to have a civil court system, a Jewish government can have a civil court system, is not the same as saying that Jewish people can get rid of their legal system and replace it with a non-Jewish one. It's maybe semantics, but it's about not replacing the Torah. Rather, what is the court doing? The court is enacting laws that are very specific for very specific problems that exist in society that it's trying to solve. They're not making laws because that's what the non-Jews are doing. Rather, they're making laws because there's a problem in Jewish society, and therefore we found a solution that's not found in the Torah, and we wish to enact it in Jewish society. And that's what's permitted, while the former is not. So we learn from here. שההיתר הוא לסמכות הממלכתית לחוקק בעצמה חוקים ולהתקין תקנות הנראות להם כנחוצות להסדרת החיים החברתיים. That a government has the right to make takanot, to enact laws that will fix societal issues, אבל אין זה כולל היתר לדון באופן כללי בדיני ערכאות. But it doesn't allow in general for the Jewish people to get rid of their legal system and go to the non-Jewish one. שלא, אלה לא המלכות תקנה וחוקה בהתאם לצורכי החברה, אלא מועתקת היא בידה מן הספרות המשפטית של אחרים, וזו אינה מכלל ההיתר המוענקת למלכות. And therefore, if the Jewish government is not making its own laws that it's innovating, which it has the right to do, but rather it's copying and pasting from other legal systems, British law, Turkish law, American law, whatever other laws it sees, that's what's not allowed in halakha. But for the court to, yes.
Isn't it like like Shmuel Navi, Bnei Yisrael asked to have a king? Isn't it like that's really what's going on? Is that the Torah is allowing us to have a king in order to deal with these issues that he mentioned. We, the Jewish people at that point, wanted an institution of a system like the non-Jewish nations had around them.
I just spoke about this recently. I might have been on Shabbat here. Whereas that's exactly the point, that the Torah says that we can have a king. So why is Shemuel HaNavi so upset at the Jewish people when they want a king? And the answer is really the motivation. Why do you want a king? He tells them what's going to happen to them, their children and their sons and their daughters, and they're going to be used and abused. And the whole idea is not that if they said we want a king because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants for us, fine. But they didn't say that. We want one kechol hagoyim, one like all the nations of the world have. That's what we want. It's very, very similar. I'm very glad you brought it up. It's very similar to what we're seeing here, which is what is the motivation behind the Jewish court system making these new laws? Is it because we want to be like the nations of the world, or is it because we need to enact a new law to fix a Jewish problem in a uniquely Jewish way? Zot ve'od. Furthermore, נראה שאין הרשות הנ"ל נתונה אלא לחוקק חוקים שאינם נוגדים את דיני תורתנו. It seems obvious that this only applies that the government can make laws that do not directly contradict our Torah. אף אם אינם מפורשים בה, even if they're not explicit there. ולא לדון בדיני גויים וכולי, כך מתבאר מדברי השח. And you find this in the commentary of the Shach on the Ramah that we're going to discuss in the next paragraph. So hold on to it. ושעין שם שהעריך ביותר, and really it's a very long Shach. אבל זה מה שנראה בדעתו לסברת המתירים, וכוונתו היא שאף המתירים לא יתירו אלא שהמלכות תחוקק חוקים לצורכי השעה. אף שאין להם שום יסוד בתורה, אלא שאין הם נוגדים שום דין מדיניה. The Shach is saying that the government is allowed to make laws in areas where the Torah has no opinion or has not said anything about the matter. But not chas v'shalom, the Torah is going to say one thing and the government will come around and go contradict the Torah. נציין לדוגמה הלכה שהעתיק הרמה. Let's look for example, and this is the example. הלכה that the Rama copies על דינו של מרן המפורש שם. On a halacha that is very explicit in the writings of the Shulchan Aruch. If you want to open up Sefaria, you go to halacha, find Choshen Mishpat, open up Siman 73, halacha 14. According to halacha, let me open Shulchan Aruch. It's okay. Maran writes the following. So there's a basic halakha found in the Ramah of Mishneh Torah, found in the Shulchan Aruch in the same siman, that any loan that is given in halakha, that loan lasts for whatever period the two parties make between themselves. So repay the loan by this date or this many days from now. If there is no date given at the time of the loan, then the default halakha is 30 days from when the loan was given, it must be repaid. Now what happens if the time of the loan has passed, the person has not paid it back, and the lender is still holding on to the collateral? So Maran writes the following halakha in Yud Dalet. Yesh mi she'omer. There is an opinion which says, שאף על פי שעבר זמן הלוואה, that even though the time of the loan has passed, צריך להמתין מלמכור המשכון 30 יום אחר תביעה. the person has to hold on to the collateral for 30 days after that. If you look in the Ramah here, really Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is going to quote the Ramah. So let's look at Rabbi Chaim David quoting the relevant part of the Ramah. ועל זה הגיע הרמ"א, שבמקום שהמנהג שהמלווה לגוי לא יכול למכור משכון בפחות משנה, that in a place where the minhag is that someone who lends to a non-Jew is not allowed to sell the collateral for a year. דנין כן גם בישראל. שהלווה לחברו על המשכון שהולכים בזה אחר מנהג. Did we go after the minhag? Which minhag? Which minhag? וכוונת מנהג שהסיר כאן הרמ"א, כוונתו לתקנת חוקית מכוח דיני המלכות, שכך מפורש בדבריו בסימן שנ"ו, סעיף ז', ושם פירש השח ביישוב קושיה, וזה לשונו, דהי מנהג הוא שנתקן כך, ופשיטה שיש ביד הדור לתקן תקנות. Says the Shach is very clear that it's the law of that place and the generation has the right to make rules that help its society. Meaning, what do you find? You find here a situation where there is a custom of a place, a business practice, that when it comes to goyim, or maybe it's even a law of the land, that when you lend something to a non-Jew, you're not allowed to sell his collateral for a year afterwards, even though the terms are up. The same thing would apply to the Jews because society has the right to make such rules. והארוך הוא הנושא ורחב ביותר, and this was a matter that is discussed at length. Look on page 55. ועיין במקורות כי תקצר היריעה מלציין אף קצהו של דברי ראשונים ואחרונים שעסקו בזה. There is not enough room here to discuss all of the rabbis who discuss this issue at length. ומה שכתבנו הוא ברור להלכה. What we wrote is very clear, that a generation has the right to maintain business practices that are different than that which halakha usually would have. על פי כל מה שהתבאר, ניתן בקלות להתקין ולחוקק חוקים מתאימים להתפתחותה של החברה בכל דור ובכל מקום לפי צרכיו על יסודות עקרונותיהם של דיני התורה. And therefore you find that in every place, in every society, you have the ability to make laws that are based on foundations of the Torah, but that fix whatever problem exists in that society. וכל שכן בעניינים שלא מפורשים בדיני התורה כלל ועיקר. And how much more so in areas that are not mentioned in the Torah at all. And he writes in parentheses, agav, just so you know, this is a mikre nadir. It's very rare to have an area of halakha which the Torah doesn't have an opinion about at all. I know what time it is. Could I just finish this page with you? Yeah? You don't even have to unmute. You can just nod your head. בסדר. No, another hour I have a shiur here in San Diego. We have, okay, but we'll go a little more. Come. I want to answer the second question. On page 55, after the 3 stars. Now to the second point, the point of the Rambam, which making laws that directly contradict the Torah. פשוטם של דברים, מלך שגזר לבטל מצווה, the simple or the literal meaning of the words, a king that made a decree to uproot a mitzvah, פירושה פשוט הוא גזרה ממש, like a real גזרה. דוגמת גזרה שגזר ירבעם בן נבט, שלא יעלו ישראל לרגל ירושלימה. Tell me about Yerovam. Who was Yerovam? Okay, let's.
The king that Shem gave the Malchut Yisrael to after the storm was done.
And he made a real gezerah. What was his gezerah about Yerushalayim? What did he? He made a new law. He stopped the Jewish people from going. Rabbanit, where are you? She just taught about this in the shiur. He made a.
In order to ensure that the people of his kingdom would follow him and not revert back to the king of Yehuda, he didn't want people to go to Yerushalayim and be influenced, and then feel that his authority as king was lessened. So he prevented them from going.
So he prevented the Jewish people from fulfilling mitzvot of the Oraita, mitzvot of the Torah, by not allowing them to go to Yerushalayim. But in my family, on both sides, has a tradition, both on my Yemenite side and my Moroccan side, that they left Israel in Beit Rishon, in the first temple times. On the father's side, the Yemenite Jewish community in general found themselves seemingly sent by Shlomo HaMelech sometime in that time period to Yemen. They served as merchants or other such things and ended up there. In our Kiddush, we say Savrei Maranan, and after Savrei Maranan, there's a sentence that reads as follows: L'chaye Yehuda ve'Ephraim, to the life of Yehuda and Ephraim. Tamlich Melech ben David b'Yerushalayim. May we merit to see you coronate a king in Yerushalayim. V'tabit le'aniyeh amecha b'rachamim v'tefen. And you should look at the poor people of the Jewish people and pay attention to their needs. And we say Baruch Hashem, which rhymes with v'tefen. In that time that this prayer was written, there were two kingdoms of Israel, both Yehuda and Israel, Yehuda and Ephraim. And the Jewish community was pledging allegiance to both. L'chei Yehuda ve'Ephraim, but we pray for the day that one day there will be one king in Yerushalayim. Yerovam literally made a law that went against the Torah. V'harei en lanu shum safek. And there is no doubt שאין כיום איש במדינה הרוצה לגזור גזרות לביטול מצוות מן התורה, ומה גם שאין בכך צורך מעשי. We don't find any person in our current state of Israel who wants to literally get rid of the Torah. Yes, you find people that are antagonistic to the Torah. You find people that don't want to find the Torah in public places. Okay, but you don't find a Jewish government so far that has said, we don't allow Jewish people here to keep Shabbat. We don't allow Jewish people to eat kasher. We're forcing Jewish people to eat chametz on Pesach. You don't find that. אך יש חשש שכאשר עוסקים בהכנת חוק לפרטיו. But there is a concern that when we start to make detailed legislature, עלול סעיף איזשהו להיות נוגד את ההלכה ולבטל איזושהי מצווה מן התורה, that some detail of this law that is going to be passed in the Knesset will contradict the halakha that we have in the Torah. לעניות דעתי, in my humble opinion, לא קרה כזאת משך כל שנות קיום המדינה. This has never happened in all the years of the state of Israel until his time. ויש להניח שגם לא יקרה. And it's likely to assume that it will never happen. חוק או סעיף בחוק העלול לבטל מצווה מפורש מן התורה לא יתקבל בכנסת. If there is a law that is going to directly contradict or violate or uproot the Torah, will not be accepted by a majority vote on the Knesset. אף גם זאת, יש לקוות שלא ייגש. Even if we hope it would never be submitted, but even if it was submitted, it would never be accepted in the Knesset. And therefore, it's not so much of a concern that we have today in the state of Israel. I remember when I was in Israel, I think it was when I was in Israel, maybe it was before I went to Israel, there was a desire to have an extra vacation day. So like in America, you have Sunday off. In Israel, they work on Sunday. And they were trying to debate like which day could you add to the week that you would let people not go to work and maybe go to the beach or relax or not have to come in for business or whatever it would be. And one of the brilliant Knesset members suggested Wednesday. Like a Jewish people don't have a Shabbat, he suggested Wednesday. But that's, that's special, extra special of Am Yisrael. פעם אחת, במשך כל שנות קיומה של המדינה לפני כ10 שנים. Said about 10 years ago, not 10 years ago from us, 10 years ago from when this was written, it once happened. ניתנו הנחיות על ידי שר. There was protocol that was made, or orders that were given by a minister in the Knesset. אגב, לא הצעת חוק בכנסת. It was not actually a law that was coming through the Knesset. שביסודן היה משום הריסה ועקירה של דין תורה. That attempted to uproot the actual law of the Torah. הלוא היא פרשת מיהו יהודי. The famous question of who is a Jew. Now, for those of you who remember that time in Jewish history, this burned up the Jewish world like a fire. By the way, the next essay, if you look at the last page of your PDF, is an entire section all about the question of Mihu Yehudi, which we're not going to do together. At least I don't think we will. But it's something that I highly suggest that you read. But it was a question about what would make someone Jewish enough to make Aliyah to Israel, to be considered a citizen of the state of Israel. And the Jewish world raged until that protocol ended. כך יקרה אם חס וחלילה יעשה ניסיון לחוקק חוק שיעקור דין תורה מיסודו, או מצווה מפורשת בתורה, יתר על כן לא יהיה גם מי שירצה לעשות כן. He said, aside from the fact that nobody would ever want to do such a thing, this will be the natural reaction of the Jewish people sitting in Eretz Israel when someone gets up and tries to annul or abolish any law of the Torah publicly, explicitly. הן אמת, שלפי האמור, נהגה כנסת ישראל כמדינת חוק על פי ההלכה. So it seems that really, until today, the Knesset has actually functioned more or less as a legal authority of the Jewish people according to halakha in the land of Israel. Biodin umitoch tchusha instinctivit. Whether it was intentional or it was instinctive, we are a Jewish state and therefore our style is Jewish. לא נתקבל שום חוק הנוגד מצווה מפורשת בתורה. There has not yet been a law that has directly abolished a mitzvah in the Torah. אבל אירעו בעבר מקרים. But there have been things in the past שנתקבלו חוקים הנוגדים את רוח תורת ישראל. There definitely have been laws which have contradicted the spirit of the Torah of Israel. Meaning, it's not an actual contradiction to the Torah, but it is a contradiction to the values that we find inside of the Torah. דרך משל, for example, חוק הידועה בציבור. The law of ידועה בציבור. Anyone familiar with this law in Israel of ידועה בציבור? You have it today in America and places as well. What is ידועה בציבור?
Prenup of marriage.
Okay, so I'm going to help maybe iron it out a little bit. In Israel, there is no civil law, civil marriage. So a person wants to get married, if they're Jewish, has to go to the chief rabbinate of Israel and get married. And we've discussed in the past some of the obstacles or complications of that. If you come from outside of Israel with a civil marriage, then the marriage is recognized in Israel. But Israel does not have actually a formal civil marriage. So it's what you'd call in English, I think, and I don't know if Yochanan is here, I have any other lawyers here, but it's what we would call common law marriage. Essentially, when a person lives together with someone else long enough, that their relationship status is recognized by the courts as two people who are in a committed relationship to each other. Now, ידועה בציבור, ייתכן שאין למצוא הלכה מפורשת האוסרת על הכנסת לזכות את הידועה בציבור בירושה וזכויות אחרות. It's possible that you cannot actually find a Torah law that says a woman who lives with a man for X amount of time that the Israeli government has decided that now they are considered married and therefore she should inherit him if he dies or if he leaves her as a divorcee. והרי זה תנאי שבממון. This is all matters of money. ומי שהולך לחיות עם ידועה, מוכן הוא לקח מרצונו. And somebody who goes to live with a woman who is a ידועה but he's doing it in such a way that he knows, he's accepting upon himself already that I live in a country, in this country there are laws, and if I live with a woman long enough, then my money will go to her in the case of separation or in the case of one of us passing or the like. אבל בוודאי שזה נוגד את רוח ההלכה. But certainly this contradicts the spirit of Jewish law. יותר על כן, את רוח היהדות ומוסרה, at least the spirit of Judaism and its ethics. אף אם לא נקבל את הפרשנות התמוהה של בית המשפט, page 56, שפרשה אף לגבי אשת איש. So this is true in Israeli law, at least then, even when the woman who was living with another man was married to someone else, but living with another man, meaning she left her first husband, never got divorced from him, and went to go live with another man, and in the case that that other man dies or separates, then she inherits the second man also, which is obviously against Torah law. Let's put that aside. חוק המחייב גיוס נשים לצבא, a law that obligates women to draft to the military. אף הוא נוגד לחלוטין את רוח תורת ישראל, that also contradicts the Torah of the Jewish people. כמו כן, similarly, חוק הנמצא על שולחן הכנסת, a law which is sitting now, then, on the table of the Knesset, שיתוף נכסים בין בעל ואישה. I don't know the English word for this, but it is the combining of assets between a husband and a wife. In halacha, the assets in the house that are the houses belong to the man, and therefore he is responsible for inheritance, he's responsible for alimony, for child support, Here it essentially equates the man and the woman in terms of financial law. Even though you can't say this law entirely contradicts halacha, because again, this is a matter of finances, and in matters of finance, we go based on whatever the person knows is going to happen when they got into this arrangement. And we already have, there's a word I'm looking for in English. We already have precedent in other Jewish communities where they've made similar laws about financial arrangements between husbands and wives. But once it becomes a law, it can complicate many areas of family law in the Jewish people. And indirectly, can end up uprooting the halakha. In this way, you find that these laws can actually undermine or at least contradict the spirit of the way the Jewish family unit traditionally operated. Next week, Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is going to take all of the things we spoke about, the first and the second topics. He's going to tie them up all together for us. And then we're going to end, probably in the week right before Rosh Hashanah, with a section that he added to this essay after the 6-Day War, and what he felt about the status of the state of Israel once we won the 6-Day War. For right now, I want to wrap this up as follows. We are not saying that a civil court system completely replaces the need for a Torah system, but rather that it fills in the blanks. It deals with directly the problems that are in society right now. If I might even say further, usually civil law exists to solve temporary problems that exist in a Jewish community or a Jewish generation right now, without the intention to actually uproot the halakha itself. And though we have not found the state of Israel has actually created laws that have contradicted the Torah itself, but there definitely are moments where it calls into question this clash that exists between a secular Jewish legal system and the values that are inherent to the Torah, inside of the Torah. A link just popped up in your Google Classroom, and that's my homework for you to look at until next week. There's an article there from a book called Gray Matter. An interesting article that I found relevant. It's in English. You can read it on your own and analyze a little deeper this concept of Dina de Machuta Dina. It quotes the Ramah that we mentioned in English. It translates the Shaar that we spoke about in English, and I feel that it would be a great follow-up to today's shiur, so we can segue right into the next shiur. For right now, I want to thank you for